Lost in Space plays like peak late 90s ambition, a famous TV name reborn as a glossy blockbuster, a family launched into the unknown, a ship big enough to feel like a floating city, a robot built to become iconic, a villain who treats danger like theater. It throws planets, monsters, time-bending chaos, and shiny tech at the screen with that era's confidence that spectacle alone could build a franchise. But beneath all that chrome and cosmic sheen, the movie was still trying to become something bigger than a remake. Don West wasn't meant to be Matt LeBlanc at first, and when that changed, the whole crew's energy shifted. Jonathan Harris, the original Dr. Smith, refused to return for one very specific reason, and even now there are deleted scenes most fans have never really seen, pieces of the movie still hanging out there like lost transmissions. These are 11 weird facts about Lost in Space, the remake that aimed for the stars and ended up somewhere stranger. Stay to the end to see how big this film was supposed to become. Number 1. New Line wanted more than nostalgia. The studio didn't revive Lost in Space just because people remembered the old show. It saw an opening. The title was already known. The family line, Dr. Smith, the robot, all familiar. That meant the studio didn't have to teach audiences the basics. The brand already carried space adventure and family danger. An original sci-fi film would have had to build everything from scratch. Lost in Space gave New Line a head start. The concept was already there. The name had history. The iconography was loaded in. And the goal wasn't just a remake. The studio wanted a sci-fi property big enough to sit in the same conversation as the major franchises of the time, not because it could instantly become Star Wars or Star Trek, but because it had the same kind of long-term potential. Nostalgia helped, but the real value was the shortcut. Number 2. The budget went big. Filming began in March 1997 at Shepperton Studios, and the budget climbed to around $80 million, a serious swing for a 1998 release based on an old TV show. This wasn't a modest update. The studio poured money into the screen, hoping scale would make the title feel new again. The effects plan alone was massive, with over 750 visual effects shots spread across multiple companies. The film pulled from everything: CGI, animatronics, miniatures, motion control, and compositing layered together. It was like building one giant science fiction package out of every tool the late 90s had. The hardware matched that ambition. The new Jupiter 2 was redesigned on a much larger scale, with a physical model built big enough to feel real. Inside, full multi-level interiors gave the cast actual space to move. Even the alien planet sequences used large outdoor sets instead of relying entirely on blue screen. That's why the movie feels split. The practical work gives it weight. The ship feels real. The sets feel solid. But when the film leans harder into early CGI, especially creatures like Blarp or the spider form of Smith, you can feel the limits of the era. They spent enough to make it big, not enough to make it timeless. Number 3. Don West was recast mid-flight. Don West is the smooth-talking pilot, the human energy cutting through all the steel and tension. But at first, that role wasn't Matt LeBlanc's. It originally went to Sean Patrick Flanery. Then the production changed direction. Director Stephen Hopkins didn't think Flanery had the physical presence to stand against William Hurt, and producers felt he looked too similar to Hurt in a film already centered on a family dynamic, so they recast the role. LeBlanc brought a completely different energy. He arrived with instant recognition from friends, giving the movie a familiar face audiences could read quickly. Don West needed that charm and confidence, and LeBlanc delivered it fast. But the film didn't get him full time. Shooting in the UK while Friends kept pulling him back to the US meant he was constantly traveling. At one point, the production even realized they could use his helmet as a workaround, putting a double in the suit if needed. But LeBlanc kept showing up, balancing both projects instead of relying on that backup plan. The recast worked, but it created a new challenge. Number 4. Gary Oldman was fighting more than the role. On screen, Gary Oldman plays Dr. Smith like a man rotting from the inside. Off-screen, he was newly sober and trying to prove he could still hold his ground in a major production. This wasn't just another job, it was a test. He needed to stay steady, dependable, and focused in an environment where any slip would be noticed immediately. That pressure fed into the performance. The role itself was demanding. Long days in heavy makeup and prosthetics, sometimes up to 12 hours before filming even began. For someone in early sobriety, that required discipline from the start of the day to the end of the day. And once the cameras rolled, Oldman didn't play Smith as a simple villain. He gave him vanity, manipulation, and a sense of decay underneath it all, like the character wasn't just scheming, but slowly collapsing under his own damage. There was also a personal reason. As a single father, Oldman wanted a film his children could watch. Lost in Space gave him both a professional comeback and something he could bring into his family life. Number 5. The cameos came back, but not the blessing. The film brought in original cast members like June Lockhart, Angela Cartwright, and Mark Goddard, creating a visible link to the old series. For a moment, it felt like a handoff rather than a replacement. But the bigger story is who didn't return. Jonathan Harris refused to appear unless he was playing Dr. Smith. In his mind, there was only one version of the character. Even a personal call from the director didn't change that. Bill Mumy had a different reason. He wanted to play the older Will Robinson, a perfect full-circle casting choice, but the studio didn't want that strong a connection to the original series. Without that role, he walked away. So the movie got surface-level nostalgia, but not the full blessing of its most important original stars. Number 6. The robot changed, but the voice didn't. The robot in the 1998 film was redesigned to be bigger, heavier, and more aggressive. It fit the darker, more serious tone of the remake. But the voice stayed the same. Dick Tufeld returned, instantly connecting the new version to the original series. That decision mattered. The body told you this was a blockbuster update. The voice reminded you where it came from. It was the bridge between old and new, and one of the smartest choices the film made. Number 7. The movie got cut down hard. If Lost in Space sometimes feels like it's rushing past its own ideas, that's because it is. A lot of material was removed. A full-grown version of Blarp was built as an animatronic but never fully used. A final scene teasing its return aboard the Jupiter 2 was also cut, removing a clear setup for a sequel. The time bubble sequence was originally much stranger, with multiple portals leading to different environments like storms and snow. What remains in the final film is a simplified version of something far more ambitious. Number 8. Jared Harris was dubbed over. Jared Harris played the older Will Robinson and completed the role, but in post-production, the film started replacing parts of his performance. Producers felt his voice didn't match the younger Will closely enough and lacked the intensity needed for the climax, so they brought in another actor to dub over sections of his dialogue. The result is uneven. Some scenes use Harris's voice, others don't, and sometimes both appear within the same moment. The performance feels split, like two versions stitched together. That's why the character can feel off. The face stays the same, but the voice shifts underneath it. It's not a seamless performance, it's a reconstruction. Number 9. Critics saw money, not magic. At first, the film looked like it might work. The opening space battle impressed critics, showing the scale and ambition the studio promised. But as the movie continued, the reaction shifted. The problem wasn't that it looked cheap, it was that it relied too much on spectacle. More effects, more noise, more scale, but less substance. Roger Ebert summed it up harshly, calling it a dim-witted shoot-'em-up filled with obvious dialogue. The criticism stuck because it pointed to the core issue. The film invested heavily in surface without building enough underneath. The original series had charm and personality. The remake replaced that with scale, but never found something equally strong to take its place. Number 10. It opened big, then dropped fast. For one weekend, Lost in Space looked like a success. It opened at number 1 and even knocked Titanic out of the top spot after 15 weeks. But the momentum didn't last. The film earned around $136 million worldwide, which sounds solid considering its budget, marketing, and franchise expectations. It wasn't a disaster, but it wasn't the hit the studio needed. It became a one-weekend story. Still, its legacy split. Critics were harsh, even giving it a Razzie nomination, while sci-fi fans appreciated its ambition, earning it multiple Saturn Award nominations. For many viewers, especially younger ones, it wasn't a failure. It was a memorable, oversized piece of 90s sci-fi. Number 11. New Line wanted a franchise. This was never meant to be a single film. The cast had multi-picture contracts, and plans were already forming for sequels. The next story would have taken the Robinsons to Alpha Prime, only to discover humans were already there, revealing they had jumped into the future. It would have pushed further into the strange elements, expanding character arcs and transformations. Beyond that, the studio was considering TV spin-offs and even animation. This was supposed to be a full sci-fi property. But when the first film didn't hit hard enough, all of it stopped. The sequel, the series, the expansion, everything got stranded between a decent hit and a true success. And that's what makes Lost in Space so strange. It didn't fail because nobody cared. It failed because the studio wanted a franchise, and the film only delivered a moment. Still, it holds on. The Jupiter 2, the helmets, the heavy robot, Gary Oldman going all in as Dr. Smith. That late 90s belief that if you built something big enough, the franchise would follow. It didn't, but the memory did.